Hello and welcome to Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, former college level high jumper at UCLA and now a really long time coach, like 33 years. I've just gone on a run of podcasts interviewing previous people that have jumped in the Olympic trials. My first one that has been out for a while now was Doug Nordquist, who was on the 1984 Olympic track and field team as a high jumper. And the next one was Leo Williams, who was an alternate. He was the number 4 jumper. So 3 get to go and compete, and 1 is an alternate in case anything goes wrong, and that was Leo. So Leo followed Doug in the order. And next up, I have just had a unique opportunity. I got to meet a young man named Jordan Wesner, calls himself the Jumpman. If you follow him on Instagram, he is a tremendous watch. His videos are fantastic. He's routinely throwing down some just tremendous dunks outdoors on basketball courts, dunks from the free throw line. He's jumped 7.5 and a quarter, which qualified him for the U.S. trials, and he's finished competing now. At the time of this original interview with him, he was just about ready to go to the trials. So he did make it to the final, and then I didn't quite make it onto the Olympic team this time. But, you know, he's a young man, and in a quick 3 years, he may get himself another shot. So Jordan Jumpman Westner is my next guest. He went to a couple of different schools that you hear about. The transition into the interview is a little abrupt because I'm still learning how to do this on the fly. So there's a lot of technical errors because I'm a dinosaur using new technology, but I'll get better at the game as we go along. But anyway, we're going to follow up right now with part 1 of Jordan Westner's interview. You're training in Florida. You're at Florida State?
Yes, sir. That is correct. Got the flag up there.
That is so awesome. Where did you transfer from?
So I did my undergrad and master's at University of Memphis in Tennessee there.
Okay.
So I was there for 5 years, and then, you know, COVID happened, and then I took a red shirt, and that's how I got 6 years out of it.
Wow. Awesome. I'm just going to do the podcast stand-up. I'm so green at this. Welcome to Raise the Bar, the podcast by Troy Haynes here with the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps. I am honored to have Jordan Westner with me. This is a young man that I saw on Instagram doing hellacious dunks from all over the place. Most of what I've seen on your feed is dunking. And then I did some backtracking and saw the high jump. And of course, being a former high jumper and a coach, I was very interested. And Jordan was gracious enough to allow me to post some of his jumps on my feed, which doesn't always happen. I get a lot of people that say yes, but I do get a few people that say no. And he was gracious to share. And I needed to get a couple of more facts out of you, Jordan. Your personal best high jump is what?
2 meters 27, so 7.5 and a quarter.
7.5 and a quarter. I remember that height well. That was a height that I couldn't get. It's 227. My best was 222 at UCLA back in 1986, probably before you were born. So I spent a couple of years chasing after 4 and a quarter and then 5 because the Olympic trial standard kept going up. So 5 and a quarter, I think, was what it was in 92, which was my last attempt to go.
227 was the A standard in 92.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, pretty crazy. And so you jumped 7.5 and a quarter, and that was while you were in Memphis?
So I did that at Memphis, and then I just did that at our the ACC Conference Championships for Florida State here.
Okay. So you matched
that.
That
was about a month ago.
What is the A standard then for the trials this year?
So the A standard has been raised to 233. So
wow.
7.7 3/4, I believe that is. So yeah, the A standard to 2016 Rio, I believe it was 229. So yeah, now it's up to 233. But I think we have 4 guys in the country with that standard right now.
So that's not much of a trial. So then they're going to have to go down to the what you say, the B standard. How does that work?
So you have the A standard, and then you have I think they kind of did away with the B standard, but the B standard is essentially just the automatic qualifying mark for the Olympic trials. So if you hit the 226, you automatically go to the Olympic trials. Otherwise, they'll just backtrack top 24 in the country. So okay. I believe 219 right now is in for the Olympic trials.
Really?
Because they just backtrack 24 people, right? So you also have to declare for that. So I think there's more than 24 people in the world who jumped, or 24 people in the country who jumped over 219. Sure. But I just don't think enough people declared, so they just took the 24 who did declare.
Wow, that's so interesting. I feel like things have gotten harder and easier. It's hard to explain. When I jumped 222 my senior year at UCLA, that was just enough to get to the NC2A finals. That was it. There was no regionals. There was no nothing like that back then. So, that was my career best right at the, 3/4 of the way through my senior year. And that got me to my one and only NC2A final. So, and there were 23 guys that made that standard that I remember being there at that meet. So
wow. So they just took a lump sum of people. You didn't have a regionals meet then? That was it? It was just straight through? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No regionals at all. That's the other thing I've been noticing recently, because I have some clients and, competitors that, you're going against that are like, oh yeah, I'm at the NC2A regional out here and it's only 6'11". And I'm like, I had to jump 2 meters 10 just to get to the Pac-12 championship. So I'm like, what was going on with that? I could have gone for more years. All right. The other questions I had, Jordan, was, let me see. We can always edit this out later. Okay, we talked about the Olympic trials, and then we talked about your colleges. What about high school? Where'd you go to high school? Were you born and raised in Tennessee, or did you come from out of state?
So I'm actually from Wisconsin, born and raised in Wisconsin, a small town called Green Lake, Wisconsin. It's actually the deepest lake in Wisconsin. Fun fact. So yeah, I had 900 people in my town. I graduated with 17 students in my class, and I think we had just over 90 in our entire high school.
Wow.
So very small high school, yeah.
Okay. And so what was the motivation to get out of Wisconsin? Did you need a lot of motivation to get out of Wisconsin?
the winters, man, that's what did it for me. Our track season would start in March. So I believe March 5th was the first start date. And we would go till June, usually June 3rd was state.
Right.
And the entire month of March, we really didn't practice. So it was just indoors in the hallways we'd be running. He'd have me dunking on the basketball court. But we couldn't get on the track a lot of times because it was snow covered. Sure. So, you just had April, May. Yeah, really April and May, and that was it.
Super short season, yeah. So that got you to Memphis. And who were your main suitors at that time when you were coming out of high school? Was there a lot to choose from?
Well, so I jumped 211 in high school one time. So that's 6'11 and a half. That's 6'11 and a half. But I mean, really my average, if you look at my average on whatever athletic done that, I'd say my average jump was probably a 6'4" bar, about a 194. Uh-huh. So really, I didn't get a lot of attention until my junior year when I jumped at 211.
Yeah.
So, see, that's what I like about track a lot. You hit a mark and then you have coaches contacting you versus basketball. You have to play the AAU. You have to spend the money traveling, all that. I just prefer the individual sports like track and field.
Right.
So, you just hit that mark. And, I had University of Memphis was definitely the top ones, University of Minnesota. I had Florida A&M was actually one of my top schools I was going to choose. And, it really just all came down to money for me. Because, track, you have 12 and a half scholarships to divide among sometimes 30 something kids, 30 something men, whereas the woman, I believe, have 18.
Right.
But, so you're just scrapping for scholarship money, man. That's what it came down to. And Memphis gave me essentially a full scholarship out of high school. Nice. Florida A&M was similar. And, I had tons of offers from other schools. It was just, here's 30%, right. Here's 20%. And, I understand recruiting a high jumper is a little bit more difficult, stuff like that. But, those were the three big ones. I had Minnesota, which was a good offer, University of Memphis, and Florida A&M.
Yeah, to explain to the listeners on my podcast, what Jordan's talking about, the lack of scholarships and then the difficulty in recruiting a high jumper is, for instance, when I was at UCLA, the core of the team is the sprint core, because you get one athlete, he runs 100 to 200, he runs 4x1, and he may or may not run, a relay, either 4x1 or 4x4, and then he also, with that kind of speed, may be a long jumper, right? So, you have one guy covering all kinds of different bases for you. Whereas, no knock on most high jumpers, myself included, but I was just a high jumper. So, if you're going to recruit a high jumper and give them a scholarship, you're kind of limiting yourself in some ways, because they're not really going to usually branch out. And that's not always the case. There are some outrageously good high jumpers that also long and triple and do those kinds of things. But I didn't have any of those talents. So when that came down to that,
right.
That's interesting that you bring that up. And then you were mentioning that you like your individual sports. Did you play any basketball or football in high school?
I did. I played basketball. I ran a little bit of cross country just because my brother did that. That was miserable. Especially when you go from, run the 5K and then you go to right into basketball season.
Yeah.
That first week, it almost felt like I couldn't dunk a ball because you're going from such slow twitch muscles, all that, for, 17, 18 minutes straight. And then you just go on a basketball court, which is, fast twitch, trying to move around. And It was just, after my sophomore year, I just couldn't do it. I came out my junior year, I tried it for a week cross country, and I just didn't have, it's a different mindset. You have to have a different mindset to be a distance runner. And first off, I wasn't very talented in it, naturally talented, totally different muscle fiber. And I just couldn't get into it. But no, basketball and track were my main sports, and a little bit of boxing. So that's what I did.
So you did play high school basketball, because when you get a chance, this to the listeners again, you got to go to Jordan the Jumpman Westner, and I'm telling you, these dunks are outrageous. And have you dunked from the free throw line yet? It sure looks like you can.
Yes, yeah, I think about maybe 2 inches behind the free throw line is my best. I have that one on my Instagram there.
Yeah.
I actually tried a 4-step, so I tried to skip into 4 steps, do a jam from the free throw line. My heel was on the line. I couldn't. You need a lot of speed. So that kind of goes to the whole long jump, right? That's why high jumpers are usually stuck high jumping, because we're not usually the fastest. We're not, we don't have that endurance. But So the free throw line about 2 inches behind it. So I'm getting there.
That's amazing. I was my first guest on my very first podcast. I think you're going to end up being the fourth one. I have 3 in the can already, meaning in the can, meaning in filmmaker logo, I guess. You shot it, but it's not produced. So I've only had one produced, but you're my second guest from Instagram fame. First is how I came across you. My other one was Aaron Washa, who has the wash on, wash off stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's cool.
But he's the guy that did the 6-foot box jump, the 2-footed.
Yes.
72 inches, right? Yeah, so he was really gracious, spent some time with me, and we talked about a lot of training and everything. So my brain just went to how was it that you became, from a 6'11" high jumper in high school, which, those of you that know out there listening to the podcast, 6'11" in high school is a good high school jump. You can win your state meet sometimes at 6'11". Depends on your state, depends on the year. I chose a bad year. My senior year at CIF, I was lucky enough that Mike Powell, who ended up breaking the world record in long jump, was a 7'1" high jumper in high school and an all CIF California basketball player. But he had graduated, and my junior year, there were like 4 7-footers in the field at some of the big invitations we went to. One guy name was Anthony Kerr, who I would love to catch up with one of these days. I keep throwing these names out, hoping that people will start networking and say, hey, you got to get in touch with Troy Haynes' podcast. But this guy jumped 4.5 at USC, and Mike Powell was at UC Irvine we're not sure why, but he ended up coming to UCLA, both mine and his senior year. He had to give up a year of eligibility to come. But yeah, anyway, loaded years sometimes. And so you're like 6'11", that should be great. And you're like, at the same time, there's guys that have jumped 7'3", 7'4", 7'5" in high school. I think Dothel Edwards jumped 7'5" or 6. I remember I read about him when I was in college at UCLA, and then I ended up jumping against him that one year. I did make it to the NC2A finals from Georgia. 7'6" in high school. I'm not sure what the high school record is still, but we had a guy in California named Maurice Crumby, who was 3-time state champ, jumped 7'4", something like that. Wasn't the state meet record, but it was high up on the state record for sure. And then he went to Arizona, so I jumped against him for years. But how did you get from 6'11" to 7'5 1/4"? That seems like, 6 inches of improvement in a pretty short time. How did that come around?
Yeah, so my time at Memphis, I've had 5 different coaches at Memphis. and with Keith Hurston here at Florida State. He's my 6th coach. Just totally, every coach brings in a different training philosophy.
Right.
Completely different. I mean, I've had one, side of the spectrum where you're doing 800-meter runs, and the next side, we're not going to run over 100 meters.
Right. The
entire year. So just totally different training philosophies. And, I learned so much from all these coaches. It's been a blessing in disguise working with 6 different coaches, because, at one point you like to have that personal relationship with a coach, that, you can just get in that 4-year routine of a good training program. But at the same time, you're learning so much from different people. With 6 different coaches, I've learned what works for me and what doesn't work for me.
Right.
I think the biggest thing coming right out of college, right out of high school, was the weights program.
Right.
So in high school, I never picked up a weight. I never touched a weight. I was just on the basketball court. I just tried to jump as high as I could. That was it. Every practice, we'd basically be high jumping. That was it. Yeah. A little bit of sprints here and there, and then also I ran the 800. Right. So the biggest thing for me was getting in the weight room, doing those squats, doing the Olympic lifts, stuff like that, just getting explosive and just working on explosive movements.
Right.
For me, short and powerful. You don't need to be running those repeat 800s. You don't need to. For a high jumper, I take 36 foot approach.
Right.
I don't need to be doing 60-second runs, in the off season. The high jump shape is different than long jump and triple jump shape. I think they're completely different.
Yeah.
You need to be in completely different shape to be a long jumper than you do to be a high jumper. With that being said, I think the training can, go similar. But to answer your question, definitely the weight room. I think that's where it really hit off.
Yeah. So, again, for our listeners that may not be familiar with jump training or interested, obviously, if you're listening and you're listening to some top flight American jumpers like Jordan, what kind of lifting are you talking about? I know kind of what you're hinting at, but the Olympic lifts being your squats, your cleans, hang cleans,
power clean, hang clean, just
a little bit.
Some coaches have me work on snap.
Yeah.
I would say anything explosive. The biggest thing for me, it's not an Olympic lift, obviously, but were the quarter squats.
Yes.
I think if you're an athlete starting off, I think deep squats are a necessity. But, once you get that base foundation of strength, you don't need to be in a deep, you're never going to be in a deep squatting position whenever you're taking off in high jump.
Absolutely.
So whenever I see some of these coaches, they have that more football style mentality. We're going to go ass to grass in the squat.
Right.
And, that's not beneficial. I don't think that's going to be very beneficial for a jumper at all, because you're never, ever going to be in that position when you're taking off.
Yeah.
For
credit.
Exactly. So the big thing I think really was the quarter squats. Once you get that weight on there and you're moving that weight quick in those positions that are similar to the high jump takeoff, that's whenever I really noticed my vertical exploded. It just went off.
Okay. Did you do a lot of jump squats then? Quarter jump squats, or just
a little bit? So after you get done with the quarter squats, whatever amount of reps you're doing, coaches vary a lot from that too. I've had coaches do, 3 sets of 10, and then I've had coaches say, hey, we're not doing over 3 sets of 5, and even in the off season, breaking all the way down to, 3 sets of 2 even.
Right.
So after you get, I don't really like doing stuff with weight on my back in terms of like jumping.
Okay.
So, as soon as you get off the quarter squats or whatever, you get on the, you do a couple depth jumps, just get that reaction time, that explosive energy back.
Yeah.
Really just trying to buzz up that central nervous system, blow it up.
I was fortunate enough to have a jump coach my senior year at UCLA. I looked at and found some kind of a jump help a little bit outside of the UCLA umbrella, and found this little Romanian coach at Long Beach City College named Baru Elias. And he has coached 2 7/8 jumpers, Brian Stanton, who made the team in '96. And he coached a man named Dennis Lewis, who jumped 7/8 1/4, which I forget the story behind that, but it wasn't like a sanctioned height or something. I can't remember. I don't know what the metric worked out to, but anyway, he had 2 7/8 jumpers in his stable. Wow. And we, when I hear about these, the different types of training and, the philosophies and everything else, it's always so curious to me, because I most of the stuff that's inside my head is from Elias. So the thing that I've been noticing these last few years talking with athletes and trainers. If you guys know anything about me, I am just to death curious about what other guys do. Like my second podcast was with Doug Nordquist, who jumped 7.8 3/4, and he was on the team in '84. He's one of Dwight's cousins, and he, you get these guys in a room and you say, okay, what did you do? And it's like pulling teeth with them. It's like they don't want to let go of their secrets. how I did it. It's going to be a posthumous book that you find, next to the grave, like how I jumped that high, and I'm always the one, like, I want to be the fly on the wall so I can hear, what's really going on. What I've been interested in these last couple months talking with Aaron Washa was about, and this again, I keep wanting to get you two guys together because he's a super explosive, 6 foot receiver type. He's trying to make it in the NFL at age 29. Never played any college ball, right? He's a Michigan State grad, kinesiology and all that stuff. He's been his team, I think he went back to his high school. He told me, and he was the athletic trainer, not the weight room guy, the guy that does all the sports training. I'm not coming up with the right term, Aaron. Forgive me. He did that. And then he once he started training seriously with his own knowledge again, he was like, wow, why? He went to 4 years of Michigan State and didn't do anything. So he comes back and now he's been training and he played some arena football league and he's trying to make an NFL, right? And, 72-inch boxing, crazy athlete. And so he's telling me about this training. I'm just curious if you've heard of it. It's called Triphasic Training, where there's an emphasis between concentric, eccentric, and also static. What's the term? Isometric. So he was telling me and the listeners about, everybody's used to eccentric movements where you're decelerating the weight as it falls down, right? And concentric is going against gravity. And then he said his biggest gains, when I asked him about how he got to the 72-inch box jump, the way we're talking about you was 7.5, how did you get there? And he said, well, I did this triphasic training. And he went into great detail about how important the isometrics was in holding some of these positions, at slow speeds. So I found that really interesting. And the other thing that I've been noticing is a trend, and this is from me being on Instagram and watching all this stuff, that I'm seeing on these feeds, but a lot of single leg work. I've been noticing both single leg deadlifts, single leg squats now, pistol squats, and I'm, thinking like you and I are talking, I'm like, just like in the high jump, you never get to that 90-degree angle, where you're like this, like you're saying,
right?
The knee never bends that much. It might go 10 degrees before you snap off of it. It's the same reason, I've had kids doing standing backovers, and they can do backovers 5 feet, 5'2", 5'4", and off one leg, they don't look anything like that in the air. They don't hit the same positions. They don't do anything. I'm like, well, what's the difference? I'm like, well, that's a 2-footed jump and the one's a 1-footed jump. It's totally different. So I'm thinking along the lines of sport specificity, and saying, well, maybe the same way you and I were talking about that base program where, maybe at the beginning of the year you do some full squats, but towards the end of the year, we're getting higher and higher and higher because we don't need to get that low anyway. And you start really pounding those quarter squats at heavy weights. My brain is going, why are we even bothering with the other leg? I was like, I need that leg to be explosive and fast and run, like you're saying on the curve. But I also need this leg to be, awesome. My left leg's got to be really kicking. So those are the kinds of things I've been thinking about in my training the last 6-7 months, ever since Instagram. Wow. Right. What do you think about those things? I just rambled for like 10 minutes. What do you think?
Well, no, I think it's an important note. You notice, I don't know if you follow Isaiah Rivera or John Evans, the jump doctor on Instagram or anything like that, but Isaiah Rivera is just an incredible, I believe he clocked in a 50-inch vert off of 2 feet.
Right.
You'll see guys like that doing deep squats. However, they're taking off in a 2-footed position. You're in a much, much, much lower position at takeoff.
Yeah.
So those are your 2-foot jumpers are going to be more of your power athletes.
Right.
You're using more of the muscular instead of more of the tendons off of 1 foot. So definitely doing deep squats for them is highly beneficial. Right. Those are the guys with the standing verts who are going to be, 40 inches plus versus me, my standing vert, I'd be lucky to clock in at 32 inches.
Really?
Right. Yeah. I mean, look at the sprinters. The sprinters, all those guys standing vert. So, world-class sprinters are going to be well over 40 inches.
Right.
They're just explosive athletes. But you try to get those athletes to take off 1 foot a lot of times, even in the long jump.
Yeah.
And they can't do it. They just can't do it.
Yeah.
So a 2 foot jumping, I think, correlates a lot better with your sprints. Whereas, your 1 foot is more of elasticity of the tendons and the muscles and things like that.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of high jumpers, I know, I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Dilling. I believe he jumped 230 once. I saw the guy hurdle 6 feet 8 inches.
Wow.
In the high jump. Absolutely amazing. Big dude though. I'd say about 2 meters tall, about 6'6".
Wow.
But yeah, the guy had a 29 inch, standing vertical.
Yeah.
But you get him going off 1 foot and 46 inches, just absolutely amazing. I mean, if you have the time, look up some of his videos on YouTube. Jim Dilling, absolutely incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, freaky guy. But yeah, I think the deep squats are going to be more for your 2 foot power kind of athletes. They correlate more to speed, power, whereas, for 1 foot jumpers, you're not going to, like exactly what you're saying, you're never going to be in those deep positions on a high jump takeoff, so yeah, definitely.
I've got it's funny because I was a double arm pump guy like you are. I think I had to gather, and drive both arms up and go. And, of course, over the last so many years, there's been a proliferation of the Europeans that are, the tall and one arm goes up and then they just run off the ground. Right. And forever and a day, I remember, my history goes back farther. So in the 84 games, I'm watching Dietmar Mogenberg from West Germany jumped to 8 3/4 and won the Olympic gold. And he beat Joburg, Patrick Joburg.
Yeah.
And you were talking about Joburg, or you weren't. You were talking about high jumpers and how the training is so different, and how one of your coaches said I need to run 800 meters, and my brain was like, why? You're not going to run 800 meters to the bar. And like you said, 36 feet as your approach with a jog in, I'm imagining, and then boom, you hit the gas. But I watched Joburg for years said that he was a 3-pack of cigarettes a day smoker, because if he hadn't smoked, he would have been a 300-pound shot putter, in his own words. So here's this 6'6", super skinny guy, but you didn't have to be in that killer shape, right? You got to run 50 feet, take a jump, and then sit down like a lion, or a cheetah when they run and they try to get a kill. And if they hit, great, they eat. And if they don't, they sit there and they hyperventilate for like a half an hour before they try another one, No,
I mean, honestly, that's a very good analogy, just a cheetah going out explosive, under 10 seconds. He's out there under 10 seconds. He's not an aerobic athlete.
Right.
My muscles aren't using oxygen, running 36 feet and popping up over a bar.
Yeah.
So I think you want to be fast, you train fast.
Yeah.
You want to be slow, you train slow, right?
Yep.
Exact same idea.
And that'll conclude part 1 of our interview with Jordan, the Jumpman Westner, a young man who is competing at the Olympic trials in just a few short days after this interview. He made it to the final and did not quite make it onto the U.S. Olympic team as a high jumper this time around. But we will be listening soon to part 2, where we'll hear Jordan describe some of his training techniques and his weight, which is he's a little heavier than you might expect. So I'll give you a little sneak ahead warning on those things, and be looking forward to it. All right. Until then, we'll talk to you next time here on Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast with Troy Haynes.